I'd like to welcome you to our featured monthly writer series. Today we have the wonderful Catriona McPherson with us. She is a prime example of our commitment to quality of speakers and programs. We are a vibrant, diverse group of writers, published and unpublished writers, and we're dedicated to supporting and encouraging our members and continuing to provide great programming. So let me introduce our speaker today. She is Catriona McPherson, who was born in Scotland. As soon as she opens your mouth, you'll know that she's not from Southern California, and lived there until 2010, until immigrating to California, where she lives on Patwin ancestral land. We'll have to talk about that a little bit, Catriona. A former academic linguist, she now writes full-time. Her multi-award-winning and national-bestselling works include the Dandy Gilver historical detective series, the Last Ditch Mysteries set in California, and a strand of contemporary standalone novels, including Edgar finalist The Day She Died, and Mary Higgins Clark finalist Strangers at the Gate. She is a member of Mystery Writers of America, the Crime Writers Association, the Society of Authors, and Sisters in Crime, of which she is a former national president. Yay. So welcome, Catriona.
Hey, I'll unmute myself. I don't have. So I am a mystery writer through and through. Thank you for having me. So everything I'm going to say is, I think, because I'm talking about clues and red herrings, this is a really mystery centered talk. But I will say, I don't have books behind me, but I'm going to hold up three because here are my credentials for coverage. I write books that look like that. So you know where you are, right? 1930s. And I write books that look like that. So you know where we are, comedy, okay? And I also write books that look like that. So that's so across so I can answer your domestic suspense, psychological thriller questions, historical fiction questions, and comedy questions, as well as questions about the nuts and bolts of mysteries, clues and stuff. Okay, so those are my credentials. Slightly defensive because I'm talking to people who write, I mean, I'm assuming poetry, short story, literature, romance, westerns, right? Science fiction, all stuff. So, and I just write mysteries. But within the world of mysteries, I do a lot of stuff. So I'm going to talk about clues and red herrings today, and I'm going to be sharing my screen because I've got lots of examples from published text. Some of them are doctored and some of them are anonymous because they're examples of what not to do, but some of them are straight examples from writers that I admire. So I'm going to share my screen a lot, and if anybody would like a handout of my screen share for after the event, just email me and I'll send it to you. So I'm going to talk for, let's hope, about 50 minutes, but I mean, I'm guessing it's not that hard and fast, and then I'll do a Q&A. At the end, Maddie said, thankfully, because I won't be able to see the chat box when I've got my handout up on the screen. So 4 sections, I think I've divided it into, which is how to present clues, where to put clues, because that's the big one. How to present clues, quite a big one. When to present clues, dead easy. How to make it not matter if you get it all wrong. And then finally, the difference between clues and red herrings and Easter eggs. So those are the sections I'm going to cover today. And the big one, now I've just done this and I cannot no longer see here we go, exit full screen. That's all I needed to do. We are going to start with, so I call this talk Deep in a Bowl of Porridge because you want it, you know, not too clunky, not too obscure, just right. Not too many times, not too few times, just right. Where, how, and when do we plant clues? What makes a good clue? How do we make sure it doesn't matter if we get it wrong? Red herrings, Easter eggs, and loose ends. So lots of examples coming up of where we plant clues. And the first one is that we plant clues in detail. Now, I wonder if I can make this a bit bigger. Yes, I can. Okay. We plant clues in detail. and the level of detail has to match. So the level of detail in the stuff where we've planted the clue and the level of detail in the clue has to match. And I'm straight out of the box with a really bad example. So that's why it's anonymous. Here goes. This is from a fairly recent mystery novel. There were litter trays. That means litter boxes. This is British. Cat litter
Trina,
box.
can I stop you? Are you screen sharing?
Oh yeah. Oh no, I am not.
Just okay.
Because I'm so slick. There, you missed all that.
It was a mystery, so I figured that's what you were doing. There
now
we go.
I'm screen sharing, right? Okay. Okay. So here we go. In detail. There were litter trays, cheek by jowl, all the way along the passageway to the stairs, and sprays of gravel arcing across the carpet. Black sacks, old enough to be dusty, sat in a pile, their contents stinking and seeping. Sorry, first thing in the morning. Up the sides of the stairs were newspapers, junk mail, boxes of empty Smirnoff vodka bottles, and 100 other kinds of waste, rubbish, detritus, and broken junk. So, first question, which one of those things is the clue? Do you think? Somebody could unmute themselves if you like. Or Maddie.
The vodka bottles?
Exactly, yes, exactly. Because it's so detailed compared with everything else. And to me, this is bad writing. Litter trays, fine. Gravel, fine. Black sacks, fine. Newspapers, junk mail, okay. It would have been so much better if it was pizza menus. But waste, rubbish, detritus, and broken junk. No. Tell us what's there. Don't categorize what's there. Tell us what this rubbish is, what the is it a vacuum cleaner? You know, is it a Mr. Coffee? What is this stuff? And for God's sake, don't put a brand name right in the middle, which is the clue. So fail. The level of detail has to match. But here's a good example from Tracy Clark's wonderful novel, Broken Places. After a murder inside a city church. Because as well as the detail having to matter, the expectedness has to matter, okay? All of this stuff, here we go, newspapers, junk mail, empty bottles, litter boxes, okay? All of that stuff is fairly to be expected in a grungy house. So after a murder inside a city church, Tracy Clark in Broken Places says this: Tex logged a buttload of crap, but again, we can't link any of it to Luna or Father Ray. I mean, look at the stuff people left behind. Hand fans, a pack of gum, eyeglasses, okay, a paperback novel, handful of beads, a candle in a bag, socks. It was all over the place, under the pews, near the altar, behind it. Even found a couple of plugged nickels in the donation box. So I read that and thought, I think I know what the clue would be. I don't know if anyone else would hazard a guess of what the unusual thing is in that. But then not quite, because it's all a bit odd. I mean, hand fans, fair enough. Pack of gum, okay. Eyeglasses, you leave them behind. A paperback novel, why would someone leave a paperback novel? A handful of beads, not a rosary, you'd leave a rosary, but would you a handful of beads? Why would someone have a candle in a bag? How could someone leave their socks? It becomes progressively odd as it goes through. So you think there's something going on here, but we can't tell what it is. So that's the first point I want to make. If you're going to hide a clue, hide it in detail. You know, a black horse in the middle of the desert, we can't see it. You know, a black horse in a forest, we can't see it. A black horse in a forest, we can't see it. So detail is your friend. Where else can we hide clues? In humor, and excuse me, but this is from one of my own novels. So this is the Last Ditch Motel in the town of Schmavis, California. It's Davis, but I call it Cuento. So here we go. She strolled over to the rank of dumpsters that cut off the view of the pool from the street. Feng shui wasn't the last ditch way, and tossed 2 empty Clorox bottles into the blue one. I tell you, she said, but I'm not going to do an American accent because it's offensive. Every time I think I've seen everything. I didn't want to know what a motel guest might have done that needed 2 bottles of bleach and surprised an old-timer like Nolene. But before I could escape, she went on, I thought it was a menstruation incident. Not that I asked. Or it could have been beets, she said, even though I had started backing away. Plus the blocked drain, she continued, despite the fact that I had never had a less interested look on my face in my life. But I tell you, I don't know what it was. So that's a clue. It's so gross and hopefully funny that there's something, and we know what colour it is, in this motel that has stymied Nolene and taken 2 bottles of Clorox. And what I hoped was that people would think it was funny and be glad that they didn't live in the Last Ditch Motel, but kind of forget about the fact that this thing had happened and was a clue to the crime. So humour is a good place to hide a clue. I was just saying to Maddie before you opened the waiting room, Maddie, sex scenes are a brilliant place to hide a clue to a mystery, because people are kind of dot-eyed because they're reading a graphic sex scene, the like of which I am not just about to read out to you today. The curtain's going to flutter and I will leave that to your imagination. But take it from me, sex scenes are a great place to hide clues. You can also hide a clue in what I'm calling authorial attitude. So here is, I think I've slightly doctored this because I haven't given the name. Here's a passage slightly doctored from, I know what I did, I squished it down so that it remained not too many dots. And it goes like this. She could have been pretty, but her pale face was washed out by her black hair, and her makeup had been applied by the heavy hand of the beginner, uncertain and unsubtle, her thick clumping mascara falling in crumbs onto her white cheeks, and her eyebrows drawn on in thick black lines, not nearly straight enough. So, well, hoity-toity, you know, wouldn't it be nice to be perfect? That's someone passing judgment on a young woman's ability to apply her makeup. But there is a clue in there, and I wonder if anyone would hazard a guess as to what the clue is. If you put it in the chat box, Maddie, if you could see if anyone puts anything in the chat box. And if not, I will say what it is. Okay, dyed hair. Okay, the clue here is that this person, someone who's got black hair, doesn't normally have pure white skin, and her eyebrows are drawn on and her eyelashes are drawn on and too heavy-handed. So in all that judgment about someone's style choices, what's been hidden is the fact that this person has dyed her hair, and she's I can't remember, I think she was a suspect in this book that I chose that example from. So authorial attitude is a good place to hide a clue. Also a character's attitude, not the attitude of the writer, but the attitude of a character. So here's another, it's doctored, so no author name, but here's a rant. I love a rant, but this is a rant with a clue. So imagine we're in 1920s, posh English stately home. I know it was I who spoiled her, but it's still a trial to live with a spoiled brat, never cheerful, never grateful. She spends a fortune on dresses and then doesn't bother to wear them. Oh, typo. She goes slopping about in the same old rags, so wasteful, so profligate. I see her bathroom light shining out night after night. We'll be ruined by these bills for electricity. I wish I'd never had the house wired at all. And she's no kind of company. Reading. She'd read at dinner if we let her. Perhaps I shall let her. It would make no difference, for she has no conversation about her. I'm ashamed of her. Ashamed and disappointed. Thankless, wretched child. Okay, so good rant from a thoroughly displeased mother. And in the middle of that rant, I think it's probably too lightly done just in this one instance for you to get it. So I'll just tell you what it is. The clue there is the light's on all night. She's up to something, okay? Her bathroom light is on all night, so she is not sleeping in her bed. She's doing something. But in the middle of this rant, it's just another example of all the many ways that this child displeases her mother, right? With her clothes and her wastefulness and at that time, even rich people were very miserly about electric light because it was a new cost to have to pay instead of just for candles to have electric light in your house. So I thought that was a great clue. So another way that we can have point of view hiding clues. And this is a really clever one from Ellie Griffiths in The Zigzag Girl from 2014. We've got Inspector Stevens, who is her detective, is on the hunt for two men. Okay, one of these men has been seen by an elderly flower seller, a landlady in her 60s, and an antiques dealer. And the other man has been seen by this landlady's daughter, who's about 12 or 13. And the one man, the man who's been seen by all three people, is a short man and he's old. And the other man that Stevens is searching for, who's only been seen by the 12, 13-year-old daughter, is a tall man and he's young. Oh, wait, I've got that the wrong way round. I'm sorry. One man seen by three is short and young, and the other one, who's only been seen by the landlady's daughter, is tall and old. So, put as baldly as that, because I've squashed that right down. Can you tell what's been hidden here? I'm going to change that right now, actually. Anyone? It's one guy. It's one man. Okay. Inspector Stevens is not searching for two people. He's searching for the same person that three adults know is quite short and fairly young. But to a 13-year-old is tall and old, because we've all had that. Oh God, I've had that experience of, like, when I was 32, being asked if I've got grandchildren, because children can be so cruel. So it's a really nice way of mixing it up. There's only one person, and depending who it is that's looking at them, their point of view gives you completely different clues. Nicely done in the novel, although I've squashed it down here. So another place a great place to hide a clue is inside another clue. Right, everybody take a drink of coffee, because I think this is the most complicated example I've got from that film Reversal of Fortune, which I'm sure other people have seen as well as me. So Sunny von Bülow, I mean, who's now gone to her rest after all this time, hasn't she? Sunny von Bülow is in a coma after an insulin overdose. Her husband, Klaus von Bülow, what a prince, is the prime suspect. And he staunchly maintains that it was a suicide attempt. So at one point in the film, her maid has found insulin hidden in a stash of recreational and prescription, but who signed the prescription drugs. And she remembers being puzzled. And in her, I think, deposition, or on the stand, but I think in her deposition, she says that she remembers saying, "Insulin? What for insulin? My lady is not diabetic." Okay, so this is a fairly broad clue that there has been insulin in the house, and Sunny von Bülow is not diabetic. And this is presented as a clue, as evidence that Klaus von Bülow has introduced insulin. Klaus von Bülow has tried to kill his wife with insulin. That's what the bad clue is, okay? But the good clue inside the bad clue, and it's so clever. I remember seeing this at the time and thinking, oh, that's good, because I saw this film after I'd started writing mysteries. The good clue is that when the maid finds drugs in the house, she knows that those drugs belong to Sunny. Ta-da! Sunny takes drugs. So the good clue is that, because there's 5 people living in this house. If you find a stash of drugs, unless you know already, you'd go, oh my God, someone in this house is taking drugs. But the maid says when she finds drugs, what for insulin? My lady is not diabetic. So what she's given away is that Sunny von Bülow is self-medicating to the max. Really clever clue. And it's one of my favorite things, is to put a good clue inside a bad clue. The people who read the bad clue are so busy feeling more clever than you because they saw through the bad clue that they miss the good clue. And the game goes on. So inside another clue, another great place to hide a mystery. Inside a subplot, okay, is another, this is, it's okay, you can see it, right? inside a subplot, and this I'm not giving names here because this is a really clever novel and I don't want to ruin it for people who will come across it in the future. But we're in World War II in England. X is a suspicious character, okay? And the children in the story, so it's out in the country and everyone's been evacuated away from the cities and away from the bombing. The children in the story, for fun, are trying to build a radio set. Children were so enterprising then, weren't they? But this radio set has intermittent faults, and they can't work out why the radio set sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. The detective is watching X, doesn't have time to help the children. He just keeps brushing the children off. He's watching X. He thinks X might be a spy, not sure whether X is a spy. And then right at the end of the novel, we find out when the children start to document what problems they're having with the radio set, because sometimes it's just clicking and buzzing. Sometimes they can't pick up the home service at all, is that X is broadcasting from nearby and the children's homemade radio is picking up spy broadcasts, spy transmissions. Genius. So this subplot, this annoyance of these children trying to make X, trying to make the detective stop doing his also important work and pay attention to their hobby. If only he had paid attention to their hobby, the spy would have been caught a lot sooner. And I admired that when I read it. And I thought it's a great example of putting a clue to the main plot in the subplot. Are we done? Yes, we're done. There we go. Where do we hide clues? In detail, in humour, in editorializing. Look at the state of her makeup. In emotion, so rants about wasting electricity. In point of view, is he tall, is he young, is he old? Inside another clue, inside a subplot, or inside a sex scene, which I didn't go into in any detail. So that, I think, just about sums up all the different places where you can hide clues. How do we hide clues? Well, by just presenting them, which is what all of those things were in the first part of the talk. The writer said Smirnoff vodka bottles. The writer said the bathroom light is on. So you present a clue. The prime way of doing it is you present a clue. But there is that really famous example of presenting a clue by omitting something that we know of as Sherlock Holmes' story, where there was is it called the curious incident of the dog in the nighttime? Where do you know? I mean, if you tell Maddie and then Maddie, you can nod. You know what the curious incident of the dog in the nighttime was in the Sherlock Holmes story? Yep. The dog did not bark. So all sorts of things happened while nefarious deeds were being done in this house, but the dog didn't bark, which tells you that it's an inside job because there's no intruder in the house. And then Mark Haddon had the young adult novel, The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, based off that story. In The Unpleasantness at the Bologna Club, Dorothy Sayers, 1921, there's another great example. General Fentiman has been murdered during the 2-minute silence on Armistice Day. So that's Veterans Day, right? 11th of November? Is that Memorial Day? Veterans Day. So Veterans Day. And Wimsey, Lord Peter Wimsey, the detective, is quizzing his valet. And he says, this goes on for about 3 pages, so I've cut it down a bit. I should like to see all the clothes General Fentiman was wearing that day, the outer garments. I mean, hat, suit, overcoat, and so on. The garments were produced. Have they been brushed? No, my lord, only shaken out. And then he discovers a small tear in the General Fentiman's trousers. Oh, just a moment. Has anything been removed from these clothes? He says. The pockets were emptied, I suppose. Yes, my lord. And there was nothing unusual in them? No, my lord, just his handkerchief, keys, money, and cigarettes. And then they talk about money and taxis and trains and lunch and stuff for a while. And Wimsey says, right you are, Woodward. You're perfectly certain that you removed nothing from these clothes except what was in the pockets. I am quite positive of that, my lord. And there you leave it. So wah, wah, wah. Sayers is saying to us really clearly, there is a clue, and the clue is that there's something not here. Okay. Now, I don't know how much sense this will make for American people, but we're all masterpiece theatre graduates now, right? Like, what should have been on the clothes of a general on Armistice Day in England in 1921? What should have been on his clothes or in his pocket or somewhere?
Poppy.
Exactly. His armistice poppy, his Flanders poppy should have been. It's unthinkable that General Fentiman was alive on Armistice Day without his armistice poppy, without his Flanders poppy. So it's just such a great example of something missing. And then Whimsy goes on, Whimsy rather, goes on to give us a great example of the other way. So you can present material, you can admit material, or you can point people's attention to material, you can signal. And then Whimsy signals to the fact that there's a nearby clue in case we missed it in the preceding 3 pages. But, you know, he says, that's very odd. I'm not sure that that isn't the oddest thing about the case. And I do this a lot, and I was a little bit ashamed of how many examples I found. So this is all from my historical fiction novels. So I've said something had been said in my hearing without my exactly hearing it. Now it was like a hair across my face, insistent but impossible to find. And I said there was something tickling the back of my brain, something I'd heard or seen. And at one point I said, somewhere deep inside my mind, something was shifting like wrecked ships at the bottom of the sea as the tide moves them, scraping and buckling to and fro. And elsewhere I said it wasn't a memory, it wasn't even a thought, it was vaguer than that, as vague as the slipping of gloaming to moonlight, as slight as the change in the air on the cusp of a season's turning. Not all in the same book, because that would be a lot. I think it's a lot across 15, not all in the same book. But it is useful, used sparingly, just ballast, just to say, hey, reader, pay attention. Something's happened, you know, maybe in the preceding conversation or in the preceding few pages, if you care to. No, it ups the ante. If you care to leaf back through the pages and reread it, then let's see if you can catch me, because I don't think you can. I think it's safe to say there's a clue, and I still don't think you're going to get it. So it's something I quite like doing. And that just about sums up how we plant clues. We know all these places we can plant clues, and we can do it by presenting clues, by omitting them, or by signaling to the fact that they're there, that something's been missed, or that something important has just happened. I'll have a wee drink of water. I love the game. I mean, I still occasionally, it's been a few weeks since someone asked me if I'll ever write a real book. People do. It's like, and when you write comic mysteries, then you've got a double dose of it. You know, are you ever going to write a real book? Because, you know, characters and a setting and a theme and a plot and laughs is obviously easier than just characters, setting, theme, and plot. So, and when you write genre fiction, as I'm sure the people here who write genre fiction know, some people will say, are you ever going to write a real book? But that's better than people who say, I've got a great idea, I'll tell you about it in the next 5 minutes, and then you work for 6 months and we'll split it 50-50. People are weird. Anyway, so that's how we plant clues. When do we plant clues? Where and how are complicated, because look how long I've just talked about where and how. When is dead easy. When we plant clues could not be easier. We do it 3 times, once early, once late, and once in the middle. Job done. That's what we do. There is a rule of 3 so deep inside us. It's so deep inside what makes us, well, what makes us human, but what I believe that storytelling, finding meaning, you know, faces in the clouds, or, you know, Mother Teresa in a slice of toast, or we find patterns, we find meanings, we make stories. It's really basic inside us. And the rule of 3 is so strong in humor, and even when we've only got 2 things to say, we make it 3, right? We say, you know, cats and dogs and stuff, or we say sex and violence and what have you. You know, we make 3s whenever we can. And when you're planting clues 3 times, once early, once late, and once in the middle, edging towards early if you can. So here is an example of when that failed, and I apologize if people recognize this, because it's a very successful novel and it's quite recent. So a note is missing after a suspected suicide, or it could be murder. Because the note is missing, that's what's making people think it's murder, okay? So on page 324 of this novel, we are told that a brand of designer bag has a detachable lining. Okay, first time we've heard of it. On page 415, the detective finds the suicide note under the detachable lining of that brand of bag. And that to me is, it failed when I read it, because they found the note and I thought, what? Oh yeah, no, that doesn't work. What should have happened to play the game by the rules that we agree to implicitly when we decide to play this game, there should have been an early reference to the fact that someone was changing the lining of this bag or something, and then something in the middle, and then the detective can find the note in the detachable lining after a bit of head scratching about where it could be. That would be fair play. This was not fair play. So compare, for example, a victim who dies of inhaling toxic paint fumes, okay? If in chapter 1 of that novel, a suspect appears in overalls with a rag in his pocket, that's fair play. And when I said that, you know, once early, once late, and once in the middle, edging towards early, forget the middle thing, that's my personal taste. Once early, once late, and once in the middle. But how early is early, I think, is really important, because I think the first time you present a clue should be before you know that you need that clue. That works much better, because imagine if it happens in that order: a victim dies of inhaling toxic paint fumes, and then you see a suspect in overalls with a paint-stained rag in his pocket, right? You're already looking for someone who's got something to do with paint. However, if an unknown stranger early in the novel walks past with a rag in his pocket, you know, in painty overalls, right, in detail, in a crowd with lots of other people, and then your victim dies of inhaling toxic paint fumes, then you've given the first clue before the reader knows you need it. So it's way, 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 way back. And then when you give the second one in the middle, it doesn't go ka-chunk, because you want to play fair, but you want to make sure that it's fun. You go for, I couldn't put this on the handout because there's no way to type it, what you want when the big reveal comes, you know, when you show the resolution to the mystery, what you want is for people to go, oh, right? You don't want people to go, duh, and you don't want people to go, no. Okay, so what you want is, oh, right. Yeah, you got me. That's what you're after. So 3 times, once early, once late, once in the middle. And 3 times what we do, we present, we admit, or we signal material. And that material that's presented, emitted, or signaled to is in detail, humor, point of view, attitude, either narrator or character, emotion, or another clue, or a subplot, or the sex scene that I'm not going to talk about. So that is what you do. That's what you practice. That's what you get your beta readers to say, you know, say, did I get this right? Write down in the margins who you suspect at the moment, when you cracked it, how you felt when you cracked it. Were you pleased or were you annoyed because it was too easy? That's what we're trying to get right. Are we guaranteed success? No, we are not. Because even if you've done all that, you need to make sure the clues that you're juggling with in all these ways are good clues. So the next, well, I'm going about half an hour, that's fine. The next section I'm going to talk about is how we evaluate clues. Good clues, clues to approach with caution, or at least you know, a twinkle in your eye. If you know that you're playing a game that's being played, but you think you've got an edge, and then what you should never do. I will try to not be too angry, but I get so angry about people who break the rules. So good clues to approach with caution and things we should never do. So clues that are too big, obviously, we need to avoid. So those vodka bottles, we need to avoid clues that are too big. We need to avoid clues that are too small. The bag lining, I mean, this novel was 500 pages long, okay? So late in the 300s, someone mentions a bag lining, 415, something else happens. It was too small. Too obscure. I think there was another Dorothy L. Sayers. I mean, I am a fan of Dorothy L. Sayers, but she, you know, sometimes she gets it wrong, and I know her work well. I've written an introduction to one of her, the reissue of one of her volumes, and I've also presented the keynote speech at the Dorothy L. Sayers Society, so I know her work. That's why I'm picking on her. It's not that I don't admire her. So she says in the article in question, in an anthology called Lord Peter Views the Body from 1928, a young woman says, "Me prends-tu pour un imbécile? Do you take me for a fool?" And that's the whole clue, which to me doesn't work, because what it swings on is that un imbécile should be une imbécile, because this is a woman who's speaking, okay? So to me, it's obscure, it's vulnerable to editing problems and proofreading problems and typos. You never want that. There was a novel recently where someone was searching for the right word, you know, like throw mama from the train, when he's saying the night was hot, the night was wet, and then mama eventually says sultry, and they're just so, oh, we never thought of sultry. There was a novel recently where someone's trying to decide whether to say gusto or enthusiasm, and right at the end says brio, which is the perfect word, but there's a typo in it, and they say biro, which is a kind of pen. So complete failure. So I think this is showing off, you know, this is a story in English, but for any reader to crack what's going on in this story, they've got to have a fairly decent knowledge of French grammar. And I don't think that's fair. It's too obscure. And also, if something goes wrong in the copy editing or the proofreading, it's gone. So you don't want it too big, you don't want it too small or too obscure. Clues to approach with a degree of caution are mostly, I think, things that would have been really clever the first time they happened, but they are now brilliance dimmed by repetition. Okay, they look like flashy moves now because they've been done too many times. So whenever you see twins, right, in a mystery novel, whenever there are twins, you think, oh, here we go, here comes the switcheroo. One of these twins is going to do something, we're not going to know what it was. But triplets, I don't know that anyone's had the brio, to use that word again, to use triplets instead of twins, and I would quite like to read that book. It would be funny. Also, a death with no body is vulnerable to astute and experienced mystery readers knowing that that person isn't dead. Like if there's a death, but you can't find the body, oh, they went off the yacht or something, that person is not dead. A suicide note with no beginning and no end. So I can't go on a scrap of paper is never a suicide note. You know, it's been ripped out of a little note saying I can't go on Friday, how's Saturday? I mean, these things were fantastic. The first thing that was done by Agatha Christie. How clever, but it's been done too often now. I would say a silhouette, so a shadow, a hoodie, a baseball cap is never who you thought it was. So if you say, I saw Petronella Aardvark with her hood up in the shadows, experienced mystery readers are going to know that that was not Petronella Aardvark, which would absolutely be my pen name if I ever needed one. I would also say, and this is not because it doesn't work, I would say that gender identity, sexuality, and race as plot twists and reveals, you know, my God, the vicar is black, you know, Joe the plumber has no E, it's a woman, you know, like that. It's just, it's been done a lot, and I think the wave of when it was done has passed, and I think that people of color reading stories, trans people reading stories, LGBTQ plus people overall reading stories, just find it kind of like a bit depressing and hackneyed and, you know, a bit tacky now. But that's me personally, and I think readers become more and more and more sophisticated. I don't think that's a good idea. But so those are clues to approach with caution or with gusto. Just do it. I've done one of them. I'm not going to say which one it was. And it was fun. But clues Okay, so those are types of clues to approach with caution. Types of presentation to approach with extreme caution. Two kinds. So the first kind is, do people here know what I mean by head hopping? Maddie's nodding. Okay, so head hopping is where it's a kind of chaotic multiple point of view, where in a scene, in a sentence, you know, you don't know which character you're aligning yourself with in terms of point of view. You know, you'll be told that someone's stomach's rumbling, and then someone's thinking about their mother, and you know, someone else has stubbed their toe, and you think, wait a minute, where are we here? And there's a really successful writer, and a writer I admire, and a friend of mine, not here today, who uses head hopping as a way of presenting a clue, and it drives me nuts, and they do it over and over and over again. And let's see if I can make this make sense. So in this particular novel, just get rid of that just now, X is replaying all the conversations he's had with Y and Z. And suddenly his perspective shifted. I think this is a direct quote. There was something that mattered more to these men than money. So we are inside X's head here. Something that mattered more to these men than money. He, X, would go back through the timeline to look for a trigger, something that might have led to murder. So he stood up and he made for the door. Where are you going? Q asks someone in the room. I need to speak to a witness, he says. He thought it was far too soon to tell the team about his suspicion. That's fine. But still inside his thoughts, he then thinks, but there was someone who had far too much to lose. Wrong, 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 wrong. Because that, but there was someone who had far too much to lose, that's the narrator outside his head. That person saying, I need to speak to a witness, not telling their team who this witness is, that's a choice, but going to speak to that witness would say, Joe has too much to lose. Their internal monologue would be, this person has too much to lose. I hope you see what I mean. I'm sorry I'm ranting, but it's really annoying. If you want to be inside someone's head here in this paragraph, you cannot leave that person's head here and refer to someone when the person whose head you're in knows who that person is. You can't do it. It's not fair. I will get back to how come this is a writer who's very successful and I admire, and I will buy the books on hardback and read the second one the first day it's published. That's coming under Why None of This Matters. Okay, but head hopping, I would say, don't do that. Unreliable narration. I would approach this with extreme caution, maybe a bit less caution, but it can be done really well. So there was an episode of Inspector Frost, you know, David Jason, one of the Inspector Morse, Inspector Lewis, Inspector Frost, you know, the holy trinity of the inspectors. There's an episode of Inspector Frost where he picks a lock and opens a door with no search warrant at all. And his boss says, that door was locked. And Inspector Frost says, it was unlocked, sir, which is absolutely true. It became unlocked when he unlocked it. But he's speaking with a forked tongue. He, at that moment, is being an unreliable narrator. And it's such a nice little point. I admired it at the time. So obviously, some people do unreliable narration brilliantly. I think Gillian Flynn in Gone Girl did unreliable narration so well she annoyed everyone. And that's when you know you've hit your mark. Lionel Shriver, we need to talk about. Kevin does unreliable narration, as I'm sure most of you know, in a way that you, once you finish the book, you still don't know. You don't know if this is the child murderer, meaning a child who murders, not someone who murders children. The child murderer is a monster, you know, a born sociopath, a bad seed from the get-go who has gaslighted his poor mother, or whether his mother is so cold and unmaternal and so peculiar that she's turned her perfect little baby into a monster by the time of puberty. And we never know. The narration is so well balanced. It's such a clever book. I admire it. I mean, you couldn't say I love it. It's disturbing, but I admire it. And also Sarah Waters in Fingersmith from 2002. She's a historical novelist, and she uses an unreliable narrator for the most perfect mid-manuscript or mid-novel switcheroo, so that it just goes ka-tunk, like Gillian Flynn, but even more clever. And you think, wait, what? No, 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 you've cheated. And I went all the way back and thought, oh, she hasn't cheated. She did not cheat once. She didn't cheat in a single line. She's a genius. So unreliable narration, I would say approach with caution unless you think you can do it as well as these three people have done it. Have I done it? No, I have done it, but only in a subplot. Okay, so here we go. Those are the ones to approach with caution. Here are the really bad clues, never to do, and it's not up to you, it's up to me, and I am telling you never to do them. Never, ever, ever, ever fudge reality when it matters. Now, I fudge reality all the time. I've just put a theatre in a town that didn't have a theatre in the 20s. I needed a theatre in the town. I put a theatre in the town, and at the back of the book, I write facts and fictions and say, I know there was no theatre in this town. Don't email me. I know. I made it up. It's fiction. But I would never make something up to make the plot work out. Never make something up so that the plot works. As did Robert Arthur in 1978, and I'm naming him because he's dead, in Alfred Hitchcock and the Three Investigators, The Mystery of the Stuttering Parrot. I don't know if other people have read this, but I read this. Sitting up, so 1978, how old was I? I was 13. Sitting up, bolt upright in bed, boiling with rage, just furious, because this stuttering parrot said 222B or not 222B. That is the question. And this was a clue to the address of Sherlock Holmes, 222B, Baker Street, London. Can you see what's wrong? It's not 222B, it's 221B. There I was, Catriona, just furious that someone had done this. And it's so stupid. Did I put the... No. It was so stupid, because all he had to do was have 222B, not 222B, and have one of the three investigators say, oh, you know, we're only one off it being Sherlock's address. Problem solved. Just can't do that. And here is my last example of a really terrible clue. And this is from a living author, so I'm leaving them anonymous. So this living author said on page 34, I returned from the park, weighed down by the camera in my rucksack. Okay. And on page 313, this person revealed that someone had stolen the camera I'd left in the park and snapped off all these pictures. In other words, the camera in my rucksack on page 34 didn't exist. There was no camera, and that is cheating. That is wrong. That is, she'd be drummed. No, never mind. That's only, you still don't know who it is. She would be drummed out of the detection club by Agatha Christie, and you don't mess with Agatha Christie. And again, it's so stupid, because she should have said, she could have said rather, I returned from the park but didn't unpack my rucksack, leaving all my equipment jumbled inside it. It was weeks later I sorted everything out. And in those weeks, you know, in that passage of time, there's time to forget what could have been in there. Or she could have said, I went to the park feeling the weight of my rucksack, thinking I should buy a lighter camera for field trips, then don't mention it on the way home. Okay. Or better than that, I returned from the park for once not thinking about how heavy the camera made my rucksack. That also means, you know, there's a clue, there's a little clue there. But it was wrong and it was dumb, and that's my problem with this novel. And not to overreact, but I've never read another word. I have never read another one of her books, because that's just wrong. So you wouldn't deliberately get it wrong by cheating, but here we go. Here's a really important section of my talk, is how to ensure that it doesn't matter if you accidentally get all that wrong. Okay, drum roll. Here comes a massive disappointment. You write great characters, you write enjoyable prose, and you conjure a complete world. I am sorry. That's all you have to do. But it works, because remember I said this head hopping, you know, astonishingly successful multi-award winning close personal friend of mine who does head hopping. I don't care. She writes great characters. She writes brilliant, clean prose. She conjures a complete world, and I love to be there. I don't care about the backlining. It was an interesting book. It was a good world to be in. The characters are wonderful. I don't care. So try to get it right, but it's not the be all and end all if you get it wrong, as long as you never make it the case that there's nothing in your book except the puzzle, except the plot. And that doesn't happen so much anymore. So last section, red herrings, Easter eggs, and how am I doing for, no, I'm getting on for about 50 minutes now, haven't I? But I'll just going to rattle through this, which I hope is okay. Red herrings, Easter eggs, and loose ends. I want to make 3 points about red herrings. They should arise naturally out of character, or arise naturally out of setting, or be part of a subplot. Okay, so they're not just wheeled on a trolley to be a red herring. They've got to come from somewhere. So for instance, again from this Last Ditch Motel with the beats, or maybe it was a menstruation incident, Kathy, who's one of the motel owners, looks guilty because she has wiped and bleached her car inside and out, and she has washed every stitch of her clothing, and she runs away from the police when they want to question her. This only works in the first book because the reason she does all of these things is that she's a germaphobe. So she always looks guilty of everything because she's always washed every stitch she's wearing and her watch strap and bleached her car inside and out. And she always runs from the police because the thought of having to go into a jail cell and share that small room with a toilet in the corner is worse than death. I mean, she would drive off a cliff, so that didn't happen. So these are red herrings that she acts this guilty. So that's character. A red herring can arise naturally out of setting. Everyone's saying that someone turned up at a Scottish wedding at midnight and did something, but no one can remember anything about them. Now, people who know Scottish people, why would people at a Scottish wedding not be able to remember anything about a stranger arriving at midnight? Because they're all hammered, because they drink like students on Mardi Gras their whole lives long. And do you know, I only saw it when I moved here. I only got a view of the dysfunctional drinking culture in my home country once I moved here, where people are normal. But there was something in the news about it yesterday. The Prime Minister of the whole of Britain, Boris Johnson, said that when the pubs reopen, everyone's going to have to drink 124 pints of beer to save the brewing and licensing industry. And someone said on Twitter, once again, an embattled and weary nation turns its eyes to Glasgow, which is really funny. I mean, it is sad and it is awful and it is a public health disaster, but it can be quite funny, and it could be a red herring. Someone can easily turn up and have no one remember them because they're all drunk. So again, in the Last Ditch, everyone's poisoned. Della is the only person at lunch who doesn't eat anything. Doesn't mean that Della's the poisoner. It could mean that Della has just put teeth whitening strips on her teeth and doesn't want to waste them. Or it could be our old friend, she's pregnant and she can't keep anything down. Okay. Although I think that's edging into approach with caution now. You know, a woman who's sick in the morning but feels better later in the day, but then she's sick again the next morning. I mean, it's more usually in a rom-com than a mystery, but it's beginning to get a bit hoary. Hoary. My pronunciation lets me down. Okay, so red herrings should arise naturally, and it's quite easy. Secrets make good red herrings. Everyone's hiding something. So Kathy, for instance, Kathy's quite ashamed of being a germaphobe because she gets judged a lot, and maybe Della is quite ashamed of being having white strips on her teeth and starving herself at a free lunch and wouldn't tell anyone that. So especially in police questioning, red herrings are wonderful because everyone's hiding something. But I would say red herrings are not Easter eggs and Easter eggs are not loose ends. I think you need to be clear that you know the difference between these three things. So red herrings need to tie in. And I think it's a bad idea to have red herrings be explained in terms of something we weren't waiting for. You know, they should tie into something that exists already. They should tie into something that we're expecting. Although, funnily enough, I did break that rule with Quiet Neighbours. That book that I was holding up at the beginning, there is someone who keeps photographs in a locked drawer and is terribly upset at the thought that anyone might see them. So everybody's thinking, well, it's got to be really bad porn. This is not a cozy. It's got to be really awful, shocking, offensive, shameful, you know, life, career ending, dreadful porn. Why, you know, and that's a motive if someone's found out about it. That's not what the photographs are. They're worse. So I think I got away with it that time because it's so deliciously awful. What the truth is when it comes out is so deliciously awful that nobody minds that it doesn't tie in anywhere. It's the same thing of Everyone Loves a Dyson. You know, isn't it great to see how much filth comes out of your carpets? It really, it speaks to something inside us. And although I think it's gone too far now with Dr. Pimple Popper, that's across my personal line. So Easter eggs, you don't have to have them at all. And maybe some people don't know what Easter eggs are. I quite like them, and I put them in the Schmavis books. I put them in the books where people who are from Davis, California will know that I'm making a reference to something about Davis, but people who are not from Davis, California won't miss anything because it doesn't matter, which is why I think to remember what Easter eggs are, you just think of Donald Rumsfeld. Easter eggs are the unknown unknowns. If you don't know that this is an Easter egg, you don't care because it doesn't tie in anywhere. It's not a clue to anything. It's just a little, it's like an in-joke, I suppose, but it can be a clue. Loose ends, on the other hand, I would say avoid. Avoid. Although, again, Kate Atkinson in Started Early Took My Dog. Oh, I wish I hadn't said which book it was, because then I would tell you what the loose end was. It's huge. If anyone wants to know what the loose end, I mean, it's huge. It's it's one of the things that's propelling you all the way through this novel. It's taking you through this story. That I'm going to stop screen sharing now because there's no more. It's one of the things that's propelling you right through this story is we have to find out, we have to find out, we have to find out. And then we just don't. And it's not, she doesn't say there's a reason that we don't. She doesn't say, you know, she doesn't give any, she just doesn't tie it up. Like Raymond Chandler, not knowing who did the second murder in The Big Sleep, famously. No idea who did the second murder. So we don't care. I mean, we don't care that we don't know who did the second murder in The Big Sleep. We love Raymond Chandler. We don't really, no, I'm taking that back. I do care. I do kind of care that Kate Atkinson never tied up this loose end, but it didn't stop me buying the next book in hardback on publication day and dropping everything to read it. I did something once, and this is my last point before Q&A, that was sort of a red herring and sort of an Easter egg and sort of a loose end. And this book was published in 2005, and I still get a couple of emails a month of people saying, people either saying, what's going on? Come on, tell us what happened, which is fine. Or emails which really upset me with people saying, I'm sorry, I must be stupid. Can you tell me what happened? And I go, no, you're not stupid. I was stupid. It was my first book and I was just learning and I thought this was a good idea and it was a terrible idea and I've never done it again. And here's the answer. So that, I suppose that's why I'm so nuts about keep making sure that you know what are red herrings and what are Easter eggs if you use them, and making sure that neither of them are loose ends. So, Q&A.
All right, Q&A. First of all, that was wonderful, Catriona.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, my head is spinning, and I'm making notes saying, okay, what do I have to go in and put in? So.
Oh well, what I was going to say, did I say that at the start that I will share that handout? I'll share the notes that I just used to anyone who wants them, so that you've got examples. I'm glad I fixed that young old one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So I had a question. And anybody else who has questions, please feel free to put them in the chat room right now, and we'll relay them to Katrina for you. Are there different rules for subgenres in what we talked about, or?
I mean, not in terms of fair play. I mean, there are different rules. If you're doing a puzzle plot, you have to have clues to the solution that people can, if they work really hard, get there ahead of you. So, but if you're, if it's a thriller, so if it, I mean, a mystery, what happened, versus a thriller, oh my God, what's going to happen? You don't need clues to the past in a thriller. And then there was one of last year's best crime novels, Sean Cosby, S.A. Cosby's Blacktop Wasteland,
Yeah.
that was a crime novel about a crime, but it wasn't a puzzle. So the propulsion, I think you have to have propulsion. You have to have something that keeps you going. And the propulsion there, I think, was, is Beauregard going to survive this? Can Beauregard not transcend, but can he survive this? Is there going to be any kind of redemption? So there was a question. And also things like, the cozy and noir, there's subsidiary, not in terms of clues. So that's what I'm talking about today. Not in terms of clues, I don't think. I mean, for noir, nobody gets a happy ending. Cozy, if good people get a happy ending, we have to not care too much about who gets killed and don't kill the dog, which I have done. That's how I know that my books aren't cozies. Like, fictional dog, didn't do any research, it's okay. But no, I don't think so for clues. I think if you're writing a mystery, these are the clues, these are the rules. Yeah.
And then is there, how much detail is too much detail?
I would think that is where you can't just have detail, you have to have detail that gives you something else as well. I mean, this is where your beta readers, whoever they are, spouse, agent, editor, paid editor, critique group, whoever, they'll tell you when to cut it down. But I think if you don't just have detail, if you have the detail do something as well, so have it reveal character. So describing the inside of someone's house reveals their character. Or if you have it be funny, or have it do something else as well, and have it be specific, because if you use specific detail so that people get the spark of recognition and enjoy the fact that you've thought enough about this detail to pick just the right stuff, then you're going to carry people along with you, I think.
Yeah. And then so you've written so many mysteries and so many award-winning books. How do you approach writing a mystery from the beginning? What's important? What do you do first? How do you structure yourself?
Well, I am not a plotter, so I start from a small idea. I'm trying to think. I'm 70,000 words into something right now, so I'll be finished the first draft, 2,000 words a day, 5 days a week. I'll have 90,000 words by the end of the month. I'm trying to think, how did this one start? Oh, well, it started from a family story. Those things that you think, I'm going to have to live a long time until everyone is dead because I've got to tell a story. And then I got tired of waiting, and I thought, I'll just hide it so much. I'll just change so many things that no one recognizes this family story. I hope. And now I've just told you, and it's going to be recorded. Oh well. So that's not a good example. But it starts from okay, so there was this wonderful example from years ago in 2012 when Left Coast Crime was in Sacramento, and three of us, so me and Cindy Sample and Jacqueline Winspear, who are all from this area, were in at the local NPR station, bigging up the conference. And one of the other items was someone who was phoning in, and so the host said, and our next guest is such and such a person who is an end-of-life harpist. Oh my God, what just happened? Like in one breath like that, because we heard the phrase end-of-life harpist, meaning someone who plays the harp, which I think is really insensitive, like a harp, seriously. But anyway, someone who plays the harp while another person dies. And she said, Beth Ruyak, the host of the magazine program, said, all three of you went, just all three of you reacted. But when she asked us what we'd reacted to, it was all different, because I was thinking, think of the secrets you would hear if you're by the bedside of someone who would otherwise be dying alone. Think of what you'd hear. And the other two writers thought of something else. So there's that makes us writers, that we know. You know, I was talking about ideas guy, that, and I'm sorry, but it has always been a guy for me. Could change. Ideas guy that goes, I've got an idea for you. You know, I'll tell you in the next 5 minutes, you work on it for 6 months and we'll split it 50-50. Him, it's never been a good idea, because he's not a writer, right? Because what we are is, we are writers, and we know, like end of life harpist, all three of us knew that that was an idea. So it can be something small like that, and then you just leave it spinning on its own over here. And then at some point, something else will happen, a character, a name, a setting, an incident, you know. So there's lots of these things going on in your head or in your ideas file. And at some point, two of them go, bzzzt, two of them touch like that. And then you get this feeling in your belly, I've got a story here. This is a story. And then what I do is a really important bit of writing that doesn't look like writing. It looks a lot like walking and gardening, you know, and yoga. But as long as you don't have earbuds in, as long as you're not listening to music or any voices, as long as it's just silence. And what I'm doing then is I'm naming characters. I'm trying to, like you know, like the McCavity and the rest of the cats, I'm trying to find the right names for the characters, and, you know, sort of maybe how old they are. And so I've got these two ideas that went zzz, and then I've got names, and then I start writing. But here's another thing. God, I can talk, sorry. But the other thing is, I never, ever, ever show anyone my first draft, so it doesn't matter. So my first draft is like an outline. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how bad it is. It doesn't matter, you know, what Deus Ex Machina pop up. It doesn't matter what subplots run out into sand. I just fix it next time.
Okay.
I hope that helps.
It does. Okay, so let's see. We've got a couple of comments, and then we have some questions here. Okay, this was from Laura. This is back when we were talking, or it relates back to one of your earlier points. Like Whisper Man, no explanation for. Oh, this was when Raymond Chandler didn't solve the second murder. No explanation for why the POV character and his estranged father have different last names, which is why we don't figure out that they're related until the end.
Oh, okay. Right.
Yeah, I
right.
don't know why I just got the Knives Out Daniel Craig picture in my head. Anyway, so okay, so Sherry says, Katrina, thank you for a wonderful discussion. Okay, I learned a great deal, and this is fun to attend. Janice said the same thing. Okay, Sherry says, okay, we're going to email Katrina. We sent you her information. Okay, Karen. Okay, you mentioned in the Klaus van Bülow story, who was that was Jeremy Irons, right? He was wonderful in that.
He was chilling in that.
Yeah, I wanted to kill him most of the way. Okay, you call the clue of the insulin a bad clue versus the good clue that Sonny was a drug user. By bad clue, do you mean misleading, red herring, or poorly done?
I mean poorly done. I mean too broad. That clue was too big. I mean, if you think about writing a story where you're going to kill someone or try to kill someone with an insulin overdose, and so what you do is you stash insulin, you know, in their house beforehand to try and plant the idea that this was around. That's quite broad. That would be quite a stupid thing for a murderer to do, because it's too easy to bust. So I think I maybe mean all of the above. I think it was a overly broad clue.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and Russ just wanted to let you know, he said, I'm not a mystery writer, but all of this is helping me a great deal.
Oh, great. Oh,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
And someone said email. Oh, there you go. I just put my website on, but yeah, but my website just takes you to that email anyway, catriona.mcpherson@gmail.com.
Okay. And
So,
Mark
yeah.
says that's a great thing about writing. It doesn't matter what kind of writing you do. You can find great ideas from reading or listening to all kinds of writers. Catriona, who I've not read yet, has wonderful ideas and is funny also.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. That's good to know, that some of it is transferable, because some of it is, well, certainly if you're writing fiction, to have something that keeps pulling a person through. And this is what I love about American literary fiction, is that you are not as squeamish about story as English, Scottish, British, let's say, literary writers. I mean, you know, I'm a noted Philistine. When I look in a flyleaf and it says, you know, a lyrical exploration of the loneliness of, I feel myself, I have to close the book again. I do truly believe I want to read a story. I mean, I don't mind lyricism. I love an exploration, but I want to read a story. And I love that, Thomas Pynchon maybe not, but I love that most of the most revered American literary writers are not afraid of story. So thank you.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. And so Tanya said, you use the rule of 3 for clues. Do you use the same rule for red herrings?
Oh, well, yeah. Gosh, I should have said that. Thank you so much. Because everything that I should have said that. I'll add this to the, I'll look better than I am by adding this to the handout, that everything that I said about clues goes for red herrings, because red herrings and clues are the same thing until the end, when you find out that they're not. So yes. So I would say, if anything, you can have more red herrings because you don't mind if they're prominent in people's minds, because you know that they're going to go in the wrong direction. So at least 3, I would say.
Okay.
I would say, yeah, at least 3. I mean, you can, if you're confident enough that no one's going to get them, you know, at the end, then you could for sure have 5. You know, or 7. I'm talking like a gardener now. Like, you can't have an even number, 3, 5, or 7. I think I mean that as well. But at least 3. 3 is fair play.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about, I mentioned mystery readers before. What is it that they look for in your experience in terms of prioritizing when you're editing and you're looking at, let's say, your first draft? How important are things like voice and dialogue and character versus plot, you know, to a mystery reader? Because, you know, they love solving things, they're smart, they're intuitive, they look for all these things, and if that's not there, that's problematic. But how does that weigh against the other things?
Well, you don't, those things that you mentioned, you don't have to weigh them because they're not at odds. I mean, voice and character and setting and plot, there's no two-way pool there. I think there would be, if you write historical fiction, there's definitely a balance to be struck between history, you know, like, you can tell what I think, boof, history, and plot, you know, that keeps you moving along. And certainly people who read puzzle plot mysteries don't want to be reading 500 pages, okay? Or 100,000 words, you know, they don't. So length, something's got to give. I would say, though, that like info dump, like a long paragraph of exposition, is not a good idea ever. So you're not losing something to cut that to keep the plot moving, that you can have really tiny little details that reveal character or setting. And voice, you know, you've got to have someone speaking in a voice to say any length of things, so you don't need to worry about that. You just, it's more in terms of how long it's going to take you to get the book ready than what's going to come out at the end. Because my second draft, the readers nowhere, I'm just making it coherent and putting the research in. The third draft is getting it back down to size, taking most of the research back out. The fourth draft, I'll do something like make sure that everyone's speaking in their own voice. Then the fifth draft, I'll do something else. So, you know, it's going to slow you down in the process of writing, but it's not going to make any difference to the finished book. But tiny little things, and little things with that do two things at once. So I was on a panel with a historical writer called, oh heck, Kim Taylor Blakemore, I think, who had written a wonderful novel called After She Died, I think, After My Sister Died, sorry, set in Massachusetts, just after the end of the Civil War, so 1866 in Massachusetts. She did such a brilliant job of conjuring what everything looked like without saying, hey, here's what everyone looked like. So she'd say things like someone's walking along the road and she thinks that she'd missed a button on her boot because the edge of the leather was digging into her foot and making her limp. So that's something about her day that tells us that she's wearing leather boots with buttons. So just tiny little things like that.
Okay.
I think little snippets.
Okay. And then let's see, we've got a couple of comments here. Laura says, thank you, Catriona. I love reading mysteries, and now I have a bit more courage to attempt to write one.
Yay.
Yay, we love that. And then Rose says, thank you, Catriona. This is so helpful, especially someone who is in the final edit. Oh, to someone who's in the final edits of her mystery. Well, good luck, Rose. Keeping our fingers crossed for you.
Oh, you know, Rose, I just read something. There's a book, a new book called How to Write a Mystery that's just been brought out by Mystery Writers of America. And I wrote the chapter on humor in mysteries. But I read, what's his name? Can't remember. A fellow writer whose name I've forgotten. Rob Hart, there it is, who said, one of your edits, read the chapters out of order. So read the last chapter first, then read the second last chapter, then read the third last chapter. And I recognize it so completely, because every time you go through the book, you're always exhausted when you get to the end. And that's why the last chapter gets shortchanged, you know. So I thought, oh, that's good, I'm going to do that next time. So I'm recommending it to you before I've tried it, but I'm sure that it's going to be a good idea. Good luck.
Okay. And then Sherry says, can you talk about the research you do?
Oh, yes, for sure. I do the research after I've written the book. So that's the main point about my research, because research is often just disguised procrastination. I'll just do a bit more research. So what I do is I write the book, I make up everything that I don't know. I mean, everything, herring fishing industry, you know, circuses in the winter, make up everything, but write down what I've made up. And then once I've finished the first draft, and it needs time to settle anyway, then I go and check out everything I've written down and see if it's possible. So, and I think that you know, I'm a devotee of this, because if it's possible, it stays. If it's impossible, then I have to change it. And every so often I find something that's so fantastic, I've got to find a place to put it in. But I think for me, if I do the research before I write, then what I end up with is what's typical, you know, or stereotypical, even worse. You know, I find the things that people have written about most, and then that might be what I write about. Whereas if I've made it up, and then I go truffling off to see if anywhere this ever happened, or if this can possibly be true, then I get to stick with what I've got.
So, and if anybody wants to know anything about active verbs, listen to Catriona talk. I've never heard truffling off, but I will remember that.
Yeah, it's like a pig.
Going forward. So
yeah, it's like a pig or a dog. A pig. I think a pig. Yeah.
We'll
yeah.
make sure that I think you have made a lot of new fans here today.
Oh, thank you very much.
You have really been so generous with your time and your experience.
I'm
And
just so bossy. Do you know what it is? It's from reading books and going, oh, why did you do that? Why? So anytime I get the chance to go, don't do this instead. It's not, I'm glad that it comes over as helpful, because it feels a lot like bossiness when it's, from this end.
no, I think it comes across as expertise. And Tanya says,
Okay.
I don't want this to end.
Oh,
So
thank you.
yes.
Yeah.
So thank you very, very much for everything. We appreciate your time. We know that you're busily writing. It's great to talk to a writer who writes for a living, who successfully
It's great to be one. Yes.
is an alchemist and put all those things together that come into a book that sells and that people relate to and that they want to read your next book. So we appreciate that. We put your website in there, so anybody who's interested in Catriona's books, we can find them. Do you have anything coming up, or where you're going to be?
I have. Oh, it's been so weird. Oh, I thought you meant books coming out. The next one that comes out is on the 3rd of August, and it is called A Gingerbread House. It's psychological thriller.
I saw the cover on your. Yeah.
But don't go in there. Yeah.
I'm not. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
No, so
but okay, all right, well, thank you very much. Hopefully you might stay around a minute. We're going to wrap up.
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah,
unless that means that you can't go, God, that was awful. No.
Yeah, no.
Like when you go to book clubs, and I always sit there thinking, oh, you poor things, you've got to talk about the book now instead of talking about boys and clothes like you usually do.
Yeah.
But
No,
I will mute myself, but I will hang around. Thank you very much, everyone, and thanks for the questions.
Okay, all right, and thank you everyone for being here, and we will see you next month. Until then, safe writing and keep writing.